This is Danny Bobrow, President of AIM Dental Marketing, welcoming you to this installment of the Practice Perfection Web-Based Education Series. Today's presentation is titled, Get Active, Transform Your Patients from Reluctant to Energized, and will be delivered by Ms. Adele Reische of Synergy Practice Management. Adele brings a unique blend of training, support, and insight to her clients, coaching them through the shift from surviving to thriving. With over 30 years of experience in dentistry, management, and speaking, Adele rallies the troops to action, engaging everyone on the dental team as they work together to effect positive change and growth for the entire practice. Adele is the Director of Member Relations with the Speaking Consulting Network and is also a graduate of the Consulting U, a master's training and continuing education program specifically for dental practice management consultants. She is an active member of the Academy of Dental Management Consultants, the American Academy of Dental Office Managers, and a certified consultant in employment law. She is also the Director of Provider Affiliations with the Allana Smiles Foundation. As an attendee at today's presentation, you will learn to identify 3 distinct patient classifications, how to track and treat each classification, the best way to keep patients active, and a unique and highly effective recare system. You are invited and encouraged to submit your questions at any time using the question button on the provided menu. If Adele cannot get to your question during the webcast, she has promised to do so shortly following her presentation. Attendance at today's event entitles you to apply to receive 1 1/2 hours of PACE-approved continuing education credit. Shortly following Adele's presentation, you will receive information on how to apply to receive your CE. To be eligible, you will need to successfully complete a brief quiz as well as note the following course number, which is REI 092222. That's basically REI followed by today's date, REI 092222. And now it is my distinct pleasure to welcome to the Practice Perfection stage my friend and colleague, Ms. Adele Reische. Hello, Adele.
Well, hello, Danny, and thank you so much for having me on here. We're going to have a little bit of fun tonight and understanding some some new patient classifications. But I want to thank you for the opportunity to help support you and your colleagues. And as a dental profession, being in the dental industry for close to 42 years now, I was once told I should never say anything more than 25 years. Linda Miles was the one that said, if you've been in dentistry longer than 25 years, you say more than 25 years. So you don't really actually age yourself. But having had to say that, I'm proud to say 1982 was when I first started dentistry. So one of the things I like to bring up in regards to starting dentistry is just the pure fact of where I came from. So as a young woman that was introduced into dentistry, my career began as I worked behind the counter of Burger King. Danny, I actually worked 3 jobs on a daily basis, plus went to school. My routine started as Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. Let me back up. Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. I started my classes till 11 o'clock, got to Burger King by 11:30 to work the lunch hour. From leaving Burger King, went to Tom McCann's Shoes, and my husband would say that's where my fetish for shoes began. But then leaving Tom McCann's Shoes, I would work at the veterinary hospital because I really wanted to be a veterinarian. However, after a year of working at Burger King, I had a customer that would come in my line on a regular basis, and as he would come in on a regular basis, after my 7th or 8th time of seeing him in my line as I worked the Burger King counter, he would, the last time that he came in, Danny, he says to me, actually, I saw him come into my line and I pre-made his order because if you recall, when you have a special order, you have to wait for it. So I pre-made his order, and once he paid, I was able to actually turn around and bag his order and then give it right back to him. And he looked at me and says, well, how'd you know I was going to order that? And I said, well, sir, you've been in my line 7 or 8 times and you've ordered the same, Junior Whopper with cheese, extra tomato, no mayo. And he said to me, what would have happened if I didn't order that? And I just smiled and I said, I would have had to pay for it. And he reaches into his back pocket, pulls out his wallet, and then gives me his business card. And he says, we need more people like you in dentistry. Mind you, a year and a half going to school to be a veterinarian. And I changed careers just like that, because that same day I got fired from Burger King because I was leaning up against the wall eating French fries out of a bin. And eating French fries out of a bin, the owner, Lynn Crossan, walks in and says, she fired me on the spot because you do not eat her food without paying for it. I took the business card that I had gotten earlier that day during the lunch shift, looked at the address, went home, put on a dress, and that doctor hired me, Danny. I got a 50-cent raise that day. I went from $2.25 an hour and got to make $2.75 an hour. And that's when my love for dentistry began, because I was hired to work his ReCare system. And working his ReCare system became a very, in the very beginning, a very mundane, over and over the same type of phone calls. So I wanted to create something that was unique and fun for ReCare. So I introduced a different platform of really, truly identifying our patient classification. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the 3 different types of patient classification. So in our industry, since I've been involved in industry, and I'm almost guessing you too, Danny, a true patient, an active patient, has been classified in our industry as somebody that has been in our practice physically in the last 18 to 24 months.
That's right.
Okay, so that's the definition of an active patient that our industry has begun to know. And the definition of an inactive patient is anybody that has not been in our practice in 18 or 24 months outside of the seasonal snowbird areas like Florida and Arizona. They say it's only 12 months to consider a patient active. So the more I thought about that, I just said, you know what? I think we need to redefine our patient classifications, because even if a patient has not been into your practice in 3 to 5 years, if somebody had asked them on the street, who is your dentist, they're still going to remember your name. So I have challenged my teams that I've worked with as I've been coaching dental teams now since over the last 20 years, is one of the first things we do is redefine our patient classification into 3 different patient classifications. One of them is that active patient that we just talked about, and I have a different definition for an active patient. The other classification is an inactive. And then there's that third patient classification, which I call reluctant. So the title of my presentation was, are your patients active, inactive, or just plain reluctant? And so we'll go through and define each one of those categories and how you're going to be able to treat and track each one of those categories. So let's talk again just about the definition. In my world, and in the world I coach teams, an active patient is the active patient that is always on your schedule. It doesn't matter about how much time frame they've been in the practice. Take that completely out of your mindset, is what the time set is. But an active patient is one that is truly active in scheduling every single appointment that they have for ReCare, especially before they leave the office. They're the ones that never leave without making sure that they have their next appointment on the schedule. An active patient is somebody that always accepts treatment recommendations from the doctor and the hygienist for perio treatment. So that active patient is a patient that's actively involved in their complete overall oral health and their commitment to keeping their mouth and their dental health healthy too. The inactive patient, my definition of an inactive patient is one that truly is not coming back. A patient of record that has shared with you that they're not coming back. So a patient of record that has shared with you that they're not coming back, meaning that they've left the area, they've deceased, you have chosen yourself to dismiss them from the patient from the practice. So an inactive patient is truly those that have left the practice, and it's not based on that time frame of the fact that they haven't been in your office. Because I'm going to teach you how you can reactivate those patients so that fall into that category of reluctant. The reluctant patient is everybody in between. It's that patient that has left the office but did schedule their cleaning, however called back to reschedule it or cancel it and then fell off the books. So, and that reluctant patient is the reluctant patient that walks out of the office saying, oh, I'll just send me the postcard. Just send me the postcard. I'll call you to schedule. Because in dentistry, our goal is to do everything we can to pre-appoint our hygiene patients into next year's schedule or into the 3, 4, 5, 6 month schedules. And some of my practices were even booking 9 months out because of still trying to play catch up. So the 3 patient classifications that I just spoke of, and I want to recap this. The active patient is that patient that's truly a patient of record that keeps their appointment. The inactive patient is a patient that has told you that they're leaving the office, and or we ourselves have dismissed the patient from the practice. And then that reluctant patient is those that are in between. So now that we understand the definitions of our 3 different patient classifications, we're going to take some time and talk about how we're going to treat and track each one of these patient classifications. We're also going to talk about the different types of verbal skills that you're going to use. And I'm going to ask this question. And usually when I ask this question, of course, I have an audience full of people. So Danny, I want you to play with me with this, okay?
You got it.
I'm going to ask this question that really says to how we address a patient when they walk into the office. You get that patient running into the front desk. And the first thing they say to the front desk admin team members are, gosh, I'm sorry, I'm late.
I'm late.
Danny, what does the admin team member say immediately after that, typically?
That's all right.
Exactly.
I forgive you.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. You know what? If there's lots of things I'd like our audience to take away from our presentation this evening, but one of the first things I want you to write down from here on out is from now on, when somebody walks in late, don't tell them it's okay. Don't tell them it's okay at all. My words that I encourage team members to say is, you know what? Thank you for acknowledging that. And out of respect to our next scheduled patient, let me see if we can complete the work that we had scheduled for you today. So the reason I say thank you for acknowledging that is because the moment we say that's okay, you're rewarding bad behavior. But the moment that you actually say thank you for acknowledging that, let me check with the hygienist to see if we're able to complete let me check with the hygienist to see if we're able to complete all that we had scheduled for you today. That's to let them know that because they're late, we may not be able to get it all done. But it also
immediately it shows them it gives them more value and appreciation for the appointment. It's not, they don't take it for granted as they might have otherwise.
Exactly. And Danny, one of the biggest challenges with hygiene is running on time. And forgive me, doctors, for saying this that are on here, but traditionally it's the doctors that help with us the hygienists run over time. But the one thing that we have no control over is the patients running late. But the moment we take control of that situation, we can help with the remaining portion of our day by granting and honoring those times that our other patients have scheduled.
And if I might just interject for a second on that, Adele.
Absolutely.
Because we obviously have to practice what we preach. And, wittingly or unwittingly, often the dental practice is training the patient to be late because they know the practice is running late. And so that can become a vicious cycle, don't you find?
Well, the vicious cycle that you just spoke about, and when the practice is running late, it does a great service to that patient to give them a call and let them know. And traditionally, that's what I would recommend, is letting them know, giving them opportunity to say that we're 10 to 15 minutes behind. You can either stay at work and come a little bit later, and I've found that when we do that, patients actually say, Danny, I'm just going to head in because it'll give me a few moments to relax. Because it's nice in it's a very nice reception room. We don't call it a waiting room, we call it a reception room. But the other aspect of that too, Danny, is that when a patient does show up late, and I ask hygiene teams, and for any of those office managers that are on this call this evening, or listening to this recording too, I'm going to encourage you to do something when you go back to your office. I'm going to encourage you to sit down with your hygiene team and say, at what point in the hour, if they show up, are you absolutely not able to complete their appointment today? And then so what we start doing is we look at what we need to take away. And what I encourage my team members to do is take away the cleaning, do the exam, pocket charting, and films, and take away the cleaning, because they're there to have the cleaning, and yet you're still rewarding bad behavior by giving them the cleaning that they want. That's just my philosophy of teaching our patients that are active patients, about honoring the time that's been reserved for them. And again, if you consistently in your practice, a patient shows up 15 to 20 minutes late for their hour appointment, and we give them everything that we're supposed to be doing in that hour still, with putting our other patients behind, they're going to continually show up late.
Yeah,
so part of my rule of thumb is, you don't apologize. You when somebody apologizes, we thank you for acknowledging it. And the second thing is, do we still have enough time to do what we had planned for you today? Because you want to respect the next patient's hour that's coming up. So that's some of the verbal things that I teach about how to keep patients active and how to keep unfilled hours too. So once we've answered that question, one of the things I talk about is how we're going to treat and track each patient. So as we're treating and tracking each patient, I want to talk about the time with the hygienist. When you are actively, and again, Danny, I apologize because I like to see a hand, by show of hands, how many of the office teams will have a hygienist doing their own scheduling. I think this is a value. As a hygienist is the one that spends the most time in that patient's mouth. It creates that relationship, your verbal skills at the end of it. And this is something else I would like you guys to write down, because if a hygienist has extremely good verbal skills, as they end an appointment with a patient, their verbal skills should always, always include what I refer to as a value-added statement. So that definition of a value-added statement is, why is it important for them to come back and see me as a hygienist? Too often, a hygienist will exit a patient and say, I can't wait to hear about your trip to Hawaii. I can't wait to hear about the upcoming bridal shower or the wedding coming up. And we don't, and those are always important topics to talk about, and important pieces to add into your hour time frame as a hygienist for that appointment for an adult recare. But I want that to be intertwined in the very beginning of your appointment time. I want that personal, I call it patient's personal history. And we abbreviate it in our clinical notes as PPH, patient's personal history, because I want to know something personally about them every single visit that I see. It's not something about 10 years ago that we talked about. It's something that they shared with me recently during our conversation. And I have that conversation as I teach my teams to have that conversation as we're walking them down the hall and getting them in the chair. But the moment that I've completed treatment, I encourage the hygienist to schedule that patient's next appointment. And as they schedule that appointment, they include the value-added statement. And I'll give you an example of this. Adele, we've taken the liberty of scheduling you for your next cleaning. It is Tuesday, September 21st at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. During this time, we'll be doing an exam, taking some bite wing films, and your adult healthy mouth cleaning. There are some areas of concern, Adele, on the upper right area and the upper left area. You remember the pocket depths that we were reading? There's some bleeding that's been going on up there. I'm going to encourage you to do a little bit more better home care with the flossing and angle your sonic care at a different angle. I'm really anticipating some healing on that upper right and upper left areas on your posterior teeth, especially with the home care aids that we've been giving you today. So you end, Adele, I look forward to seeing you. And you end with why is it important for them to come back? I just actually had my cleaning today. I travel an hour and 20 minutes to see my dentist. And I've worked with this team for 19 years. And she says, Adele, I don't know how to treat you like a patient because you're like our family here. I said, well, I still want you to treat me like a patient because I want to hear your verbal skills, the stuff that we've taught. And she kind of blushes. And again, I've known her for 19 years. And I said, Janet, you have to pretend I am your patient. I want to hear everything that we put in place. I have a healthy mouth, but I do have some pockets that are bleeding on the posteriors of 2 and 15, excuse me. Just because my teeth are so small back there, it's hard to get my toothbrush at a sonic care. So even having a healthy mouth, she's still finding areas that I need some attention. And the fact that her hand scaler is the only thing that's going to be able to clean as well on those distal pieces of distal buccal portions of my teeth. So having a value-added statement with the hygienist is extremely important. But there's also another piece to this. It's a handoff. And having a handoff, and when the doctor walks in the room, whether you've buzzed for the doctor or you guys have again gone back to the time frame of a hygiene appointment, when's the ideal time for the doctor to come in? If a patient's on time, things are rolling really well, I ask my hygienist, okay, at the 20 minutes past the hour, or 25 minutes past the hour, or 10:30, what's the absolute best time so that we don't have to wait for him to be buzzed? Because if he's in between patients or she's in between patients, I want her to go there first before they go back into their office or go back to grab a sip of coffee. I want them to go see the hygienist so we don't hold the hygienist up. So as keeping patients active really, really involves the handoff from the hygienist to the doctor. And a good handoff really requires 7 specific keys to a really good handoff. Of course, it's the name. I'm going to give you a brief story real quick. I had a patient walk into the office, and I'd been there for about a year. This practice I had ran for 14 years. And so the name's really important. This patient walked in, and I said, well, hello, Elizabeth. And she put her hands on her hips. She says, my name is Mrs. Hadley. I've been a teacher for over 45 years, and I earned the right to be Mrs. Hadley. And I was taken back. I'm in my early 30s at this point, and I said, well, Mrs. Hadley, I appreciate you giving me the correct pronunciation of your name, and I'll make sure that all of our team members do refer to you as Mrs. Hadley. But just knowing for sure what their preference is, Mr. or Mrs. or their first name or their nickname, and then making sure that we're using that correctly, the introduction to the doctor, and sharing information. Dr. Yasuda is my dentist. Janet, when he walks in, says, Dr. Yasuda, of course you know Adele. Adele's doing really well. We've discussed some of the areas that are bleeding on the posteriors of number 2 and 15. I had to place some fluoride on the root surface. She's giving information to him over me, and then looks directly at me and him as she's talking, creating this triage effect of eye contact between myself, Dr. Yasuda, myself, and Dr. Yasuda. So we're always including each one of us in this conversation, in the handoff. And then she says, do you have any questions? Is there anything else that you'd like to add, Adele? Anything like that. But the body language, Danny, I was speaking at ADOM last week, so presenting this in a 3.5-hour course, I got to use a lot of different body language while I was presenting this, but one of the most common things that we see doctors is they will lean up against the counter where they just wash their hands and and I'm actually doing it as I'm standing here talking, but they'll put their hands in that crossed over the chest format and just listen. Well, that speaks body language loud and clear that you're yes, it might be comfortable. You want to be open. Your arms have got to be down. My preference is that you're standing and looking back at the patient and looking at the hygienist and just still drying your hands and just, that intent listening art. Yep. There's a true art of listening, right?
And if I may just underscore the point that you've made about the name, because in our telephone skills coaching, we go to great pains to encourage people to get and use the proper spelling and pronunciation of the name. As you probably know, Dale Carnegie in How to Win Friends and Influence People said that a person's name is the sweetest sound they'll ever hear. And so I'm sure you've since learned and coach everybody to always confirm before you, at the very beginning of the first phone call, we say, before I go on, would you mind if I confirm the correct spelling and pronunciation of your name?
And absolutely.
Especially for people who have a hard to spell or pronounce name, that's gold, because they go through life with people not even trying to spell it or pronounce it correctly. So if you want to make a friend and make a connection quickly and easily, get and confirm the correct spelling and pronunciation, or in the case of your teacher, how she wishes to be referred to, addressed.
And when people call my house, my maiden name before I got married was Johnson. So if they messed up Johnson, I knew it wasn't for me, but they could always mess up Adele, just the way it's spelled. So once I got married, it became Adele Reach. And so, I use acronyms. When somebody says, how do you, not acronyms, pronunciation, like, how do you pronounce your name? Rye, bread, she, woman, Reische. And so it just makes it easier, even though it doesn't look like that way it's spelled, but that's how you pronounce it. So you're absolutely right.
I say Bob Rowe, float paddle.
Bob Rowe paddle.
Float
Bob
paddle.
Bob Rowe to paddle.
Yeah. Right.
Yep. So ask, and when you take that new patient phone call, just as you said, so that I may pronounce your name correctly, would you spell it for me and pronounce it as you, so. And I put, anything over the top of it that would let any other pronounce this way for any other team member to be able to say. So, we're talking right now about the dynamics of a handoff, and you understand that is about the relationship part of it too. And once before Danny and I started getting the conversation about how to say somebody's name and how to win their hearts of them, because you do know their name correctly. We also talked about the true art of listening, and I myself am a firm believer. Eye contact is the number one form of it, and then if you understand the fact of true art of listening, you may also use. So what I'm hearing is that you're having some discomfort on the upper left. It's been on and off for the last 2 days, but pain to pressure more than anything. So you repeat exactly what you heard as the doctor. And then you reassure them with good verbal skills, we're going to have an opportunity to take a look at that. But what's even better is if the patient themselves has shared all of this information, and if there's any hygienist on our call this evening or listening to this recording, I'm almost certain you've had this happen in your lifetime too, of working with a dentist. The patient will tell you nothing's wrong, but the moment the dentist walks in, they'll make a comment about having some sensitivity in an area that, gosh darn it, had they told me that before, I would have taken a film. I would have taken a PA, because anytime we have some sensitivity, we want to make sure that we have everything available for our clinician, our doctor, to do the diagnosing of what's going on in that area. So I often, when it comes time to that repeat, do you have any questions, as I'm handing off to the doctor, and they will say, oh yeah, there was another area. Sometimes I want to say to the patient, and politely, you can, next time let me know so I can prepare this ahead of time for my doctor, but that's after the fact. We're not going to browbeat them, but in the future, please don't hesitate to share information like this with me so that I have an opportunity to have all the images that my doctor would need to help determine what's going on. I want my hygienist to say stuff like this. I want them to help teach the patients that it's okay to communicate just as much to me about what's going on inside their mouth, because quite honestly, I want the hygienist spending more time than the doctor does, right? So When it comes to after the verbal skills and treating and tracking patients, I want to also talk just a bit about how we do that handoff to the front desk. And doing the handoff to the front desk also means sharing with the front desk team members exactly what you said as a value-added statement at the front desk. As long as your front desk, I know with the HIPAA guidelines and whatnot, we may not always share a lot of information at the front desk depending on who's in the reception room. And my rule of thumb is nobody should be in the reception room. They're mostly in the operatories because we have a busy practice. But as we have exit patients to the front, the hygienist keeping patients active would also hand off to the front desk the specifics of, I was able to treat Adele as scheduled today. Adele, I've taken the liberty of scheduling her next appointment. And when I talk about the hygienist scheduling the next appointment, something I didn't mention, and actually I'm going to give you 2 pearls right here. And I'm 90% certain the majority of you will truly believe this, truly understand the second pearl. But the first pearl of the hygienist scheduling their own appointments, there's a lot of value to the hygienist scheduling because it's a relationship part. If you are not having them schedule right now, it's about building that relationship, because the hygienist will say to them, I've taken the liberty of scheduling you with me. I look forward to seeing you with me. And patients are it's harder for them mentally to cancel when they've said with me. I will be sending you a reminder. These are things I teach the hygienist to communicate throughout the appointment, and it helps with the unfilled hours that we have. But and you know what, Danny, I just drew a complete blank where the second pearl was.
Well, one is good.
I know now.
I think the fact that you make it personal, I like to say too, the reason that telephone skills is so powerful and why it reduces no-shows is that people don't like to disappoint other people. So when you make a personal connection with someone making an appointment for the first time, they're making an appointment with you, not with this impersonal entity, called a medical or dental office. And so I think that's very important.
And as our hygiene recare announcements say you have an upcoming appointment with your hygienist, Kara. You have an upcoming appointment with your hygienist, Taryn. So it's personalizing it with the person that's involved. But the second pearl I wanted to give to you too, especially talking about hygienists scheduling their own appointments, is as a hygienist is especially about hygienists scheduling their own appointments, the pearl I'm going to give you is going to help you keep your hygienist on schedule and get their lunch. I'm a firm believer. Do everything you can. The last appointment before lunch is one of your patients that don't require films or don't require exam. It's one of those healthy mouth 3-month cleanings, or it's one of our perio mouth 3 or 4 month cleanings. But if you really structure your schedule as you go into the future of scheduling before lunch, that patient is one that doesn't require doctor's exams or x-rays. I have found when I implement that, I have a much happier team, and most hygienists get their lunch. And the people that are responsible for this are the hygienist, of course, because hygienists fill every single opening in a hygiene schedule except for 3 per day. 3 per day. And those 3 per day are a new patient block that should be in your schedule and a root planing block that should be in your schedule. I like teaching my team to pre-block so they have every opportunity to direct patients into those ideal time slots. Most of my teams are 3 or more hygienists per team. And so when you have 2 hygienists on a daily basis, which is the norm for most practices, you want one of them to be doing 2 hours of root planing in the morning and one of them to be doing 2 hours of root planing in the afternoon. But you fill those 2-hour blocks. Some offices 2 days in advance, some offices will fill them a week in advance. But those are just some of the tips I like to give, especially when it comes to the fact that hygienists are scheduling their own appointments except for new patient cleanings and root planings. But the lunchtime time frame should be either a new patient that's already had their comprehensive exam, a 3-month healthy patient, or a 4-month patient, any one of those that do not require doctor's exams or films. Because realistically, when you take films, you're supposed to be doing an exam that day. Any questions so far, Danny? Do I need to give you any kind of clarification?
No, it's all going really well. Everything is clear.
All righty.
Please proceed.
So, the sharp-looking admin team member that's been sitting here on our screen, I wanted the example of the handoff to the admin I gave a little bit ago, and I'm going to do it again too. It's the same thing that I would say as Adele. I'm going to hand off to the front desk. Adele, excuse me, we were able to schedule as treat as scheduled today. I've taken the liberty of scheduling her for her next appointment on Tuesday, September 21st at 2 p.m. Remember, Adele, I'm really looking forward to seeing some healing on those post-back teeth of yours, those upper molars. So I'm going to make it layman for them. And then I walk away. I don't say anything else. So it's always about ending with a value-added statement. And the value-added statement is, why is it important for them to come back?
To them. I like how you put a positive spin on it too. It's like you don't say so you don't experience more decay or we don't have to pull your teeth out. It's a positive statement that we're looking forward to a lot of healing, I think you'd said earlier, which was great.
Yep, looking forward to seeing some healing in that area, especially with the perio aids and the new instructions that I've given you. And it's rewarding those patients. And another reason for this, though, is because what happens after the fact of having this, when the phone rings with an office, and if there's a phone rings, of course, at the office, and the first thing that happens is the patient calls and says, actually, somebody should be answering the phone saying, "Thank you for calling Dr. McKee's office. This is Adele. Nice tone of voice, inflection of your voice. I teach my team members never to say good morning or good afternoon, because somebody is going to catch you in saying, well, you rushed the morning by because it's still morning when I said good afternoon." So
one less thing to worry about. Yeah, just say thank you for calling. I agree.
One less thing to worry about. Thank you for calling Dr. McKee's office. This is Adele. And I think most people's hair on the back of their neck stand up when we hear this next few statements. It's going to be a great day, or how can I make you smile? I mean, those are things that we don't have to say anymore. Less is more. Less is more. So thank you for calling Dr. McKee's office. This is Adele. So the moment that the phone rings and you answer that, you listen to the patient's request, and they say, "Oh, I have an appointment coming up and I need to cancel it." Well, in my world, we don't use the word cancel. We use dental terminology that's specific to converting our team and patients to understand it's never used the word cancel. We've had to change an appointment, but we never use the word cancel. So there's a lot of different dental terminologies I convert into different positive words. But the moment that the patient says, "Hi, this is Ken. I need to cancel my upcoming appointment," I teach my team members to put them on hold. May I place you on hold for just a moment, Ken? Because the moment you place them on hold, and this is about how you want to keep your patients active, you don't just reschedule the patient. You put them on hold, and you look at their last clinical notes, especially the fact that they're coming in to see a hygienist, and you look for that last clinical note that has a value-added statement. I even have team members, if their practice management software is really good, we can add that value-added statement into their appointment card itself, so we don't have to look into the clinical notes. But I ask them to look in the clinical notes, and I ask them to then pick up the phone and say, "Gosh, Ken, is there any way we can help you keep this appointment? As you may recall, your hygienist, Kara, was looking forward to seeing some healing, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da." And then, once I repeat that value-added statement, I pause. And I say, and then if you're able to keep this appointment, you, my friend, can avoid a missed appointment fee. Now, missed appointment fees are a double-edged sword in practices. I'm a firm believer missed appointment should happen. Missed appointment fees should happen, excuse me. When we use correct words, like we've reserved your appointment, and missed appointment fees should happen, especially if we have sat down with the patient and reviewed our patient agreement. But going back at this appointment, that's a whole nother topic that I could talk about, Danny, but going back at this appointment, this specific piece about right here is when the phone rings, you really want to make sure you put that patient on hold and do some research. Let's just use an example of a phone ring and a patient calls and says they're having some discomfort. And you say, gosh, I'm sorry to hear that. May I ask how long you've had the discomfort and what area it's in? Okay, may I place you on hold for just a moment? Then I look at their clinical notes, I look at their treatment plan. And my personality, the way I communicate to patients, I have done this many times. I've picked up the phone and say, because I was the office admin for 14 years in one practice, and I'd pick up the phone and I would say, well, you know what, Doug, I'm not surprised you're having discomfort on the upper right. Dr. McKee had recommended a crown and a filling on those two teeth, but being it's been almost 3 months since he's recommended it, we're going to need to take a current film to make sure that the decay hasn't gotten any larger and that we can still treat this tooth. So I like to put the person on hold because it's so much easier. I teach teams to put them on hold because you have every opportunity, and I actually call this ammunition. I have all my ammunition ready, available, and if they were breathing in my ear while I'm trying to do this, I may miss something. So that 30 seconds to a minute that you put them on hold, thank you for holding, and gosh darn it, is there any way I can help you keep your appointment with Kara? As you may recall, she was really looking forward to seeing some healing on those posterior teeth. And Ken, if we are able to keep your appointment, you can avoid a missed appointment fee of $75.
Well, I love how you refer to the phone and placing people on hold as ammunition. I call it an arrow in your communications quiver. I also encourage people, when appropriate, to place people on hold in the context of new patient appointments. If you're busy or it's a distracting, chaotic situation where you are, and this is where cordless headsets come in handy too, so you're not tethered to the desk. Our verbiage is, would you mind if I place you on hold for just a moment so that I can get to a quiet area and give you my undivided attention? So again, I'm not saying it's a madhouse here, I got to put you on hold or hold please. I'm saying it in such a way that they understand I'm doing it for them. It's a value added statement. And it's also, so you shouldn't be, especially if you have a professionally produced on-hold message system, so that when someone does place you on hold, they don't hear staticky music or silence or something like that. It's a wonderful tool, something that you can rely upon to indeed give this caller your undivided attention. And you're using it for another purpose so that you can actually gather information and not so readily and quickly allow them to cancel. And I think giving the patients and being silent and giving them a chance to respond to your suggestion that they consider keeping the appointment will, in and of itself, help reduce cancellations. So I think it's terrific.
Excuse me, when that silence is so important, and one of the things that I teach team members regularly, which I'm sure you do, is that I call it the pregnant pause, Danny. The moment that you want somebody to hear something, you stop talking. And the last few words that you have, especially when it comes to delivering something important to a patient, is you stop talking. And, I gave an example of even when it comes to presenting a treatment plan. Traditionally, when people present treatment plans, people will say, so the recommendation is for doctor is this, this, and this, and your dollar insurance should cover this versus patient portion being this, and we would do this versus based on the treatment recommendations of restoring the upper right crown and a filling, you're looking at a total treatment cost of $2,800.
And then be quiet and let them process.
And then be quiet.
Yes.
And
instead of, would you like to proceed with this treatment? Barging in like a bull in a china closet? Right.
Be quiet, be quiet, be testing quiet, that song that we grew up with. But it is be quiet and let them respond, because typically their next response is going to be, what will my insurance cover? And then I teach verbal skills that say, you know what, fortunately for you, you have some insurance to help assist you. However, our goal is always to prepare you for the full amount.
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, these are verbal skills that help keep patients active in your practice and don't question what it is that you're doing. You're always, always, always transparent. But keeping patients active on your schedule means taking the time to put the patient on hold when the phone rings. So something I that's not done often enough is celebrating our active patients. And the reason I bring up celebrating our active patients is because I think that the easiest thing to do is thank our patients on a regular basis that are actively engaged in participating in our practice and being patients of our practice and keeping their appointments. And I hold a marketing meeting once a year. Actually, it's almost once every 3 years now with the sizes of teams that I'm working with. But I teach my teams to market to some of the silliest things that can happen to make a patient walk out of their practice smiling. So every so often we'll have a pre-meeting preparation. And this pre-meeting preparation, I'll go around the room and I'll give every single person a month: January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. And I will encourage them to look up anything that's within that month that we can celebrate and come back to the next meeting so we can make a list of these things. And then, so when they come back to the office for our next workshop, we start listing all the ideas. I ask them to give 3 ideas per month. So now with 10 team members, we have 30 different ideas. And they're silly ones, like National Marshmallow Day, National Pencil Day. I mean, we did Earth Day, and we gave patients packages of flowers to a couple of my offices. We did Earth Day, and we did seedlings for flowers, and we did bulbs in another location. But a lot of the marketing things I can do when they're different locations, especially being, I work all over the United States. But the best thing about celebrating your active patients is you, as a team, come up with fun, creative ways to celebrate patients. One of my offices, which is actually my own dentist, every Halloween, Doctor picks a theme. Every Halloween, he picks a theme, and he encourages the patients that are in the office that day to dress within the theme. Those that come dressed get a really nice gift, get their picture taken. We put it up on Facebook. How much fun are we having celebrating Halloween, even though we may or may not be working, but we choose a day just before Halloween. This particular office, every Veterans Day, we have patients that call, are you doing the Veterans drive? And we put an army trunk in our reception room, and we find out what the veterans need in our community, and we do an email blast. So we find creative ways to do marketing that include our patients, to have fun with us in the office, but also include our patients to help support our community and also celebrate birthdays and National Dog Day. I mean, on National Dog Day, I have one office, I should send you a picture, Danny. Everybody brought their dogs in, and we took pictures of them and had a collage. It was so fun. I mean, everybody brought a picture of their dog in, and we just started putting them up all over the office. They didn't bring their dogs in. They brought a picture of their dogs in.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for clarifying. Now, you do a lot of fun things. I'm looking forward to hearing and seeing more of those for sure.
Well, when it comes to celebrating, it's involving your patients. So a couple of things. Those are just tips that I encourage people to do, and especially, this is supposed to say, what about the inactive patient, not about the reluctant patient, because this is it's supposed to be about the reluctant, inactive patient yet. So we've talked about tracking. So please forgive me. This should say inactive, not reluctant at the top. But so we've talked so far about how to treat and track active patients. Treat and track active patients, treating them more than anything, tracking them based on the fact that they are always on the schedule. So the words about what about the inactive patient? The inactive patient, as I said, is the patient that has chosen to leave your office or we have dismissed them. And one of the things we don't do enough and I think this is important that you guys also write this down. We need to be able to track the reasons why our patients are leaving. In a practice, we always track our new patients, but we typically, and I have been tracking patients that leave because I want to follow the attrition in a practice. I want to make sure that the door exiting is not as many as the door coming into our practice. But more importantly, I want to track the reasons why they are leaving the practice. I'm going to take a few minutes to share another story with you. I mentioned I was in practice for 14 years with a doctor, and he groomed me. It was my practice, our practice. We taught the whole team. I built a team of 20 of us, and it was our practice. But the day that I had a patient, I had 3 hygienists on a daily basis, and started off a summer day with 6 family members coming in on the same day. 2 in the morning, and then the 4 additional siblings in the afternoon. So the 2 brothers in the morning were in at my 8 o'clock time frame, and within 15 minutes of them leaving the office, I get a phone call from the doctor across from the dentist across the town from us, asking for the films for the whole family. I said, well, you know what, before I do that, I need to call and talk with Patty, find out what's going on. Patty was my neighbor. Patty, for 14 years, I watched Patty have 7 children in the 14-year time frame, and my neighbor that I didn't understand why she was choosing to leave the practice. So I called her, and I said, Patty, I just got a call from Dr. Cordano's office. And I paused, and she said, yep. And I said, Patty, I'm curious, why have you chosen to leave our practice? Said, no, we're done. Said, Patty, I've watched you and this family grow up in our practice. Please, if something was done, I'd like to have an opportunity to make it right. The doctor I worked for was so confident that I could do just about anything. He knew that I has always had the practice at heart. That was my first, always had the practice in mind. So when I'm talking to Patty, I knew that I had some freedom to say, Patty, if there was something done wrong, I would like to have the opportunity to make it right. And she said, Adele, if anybody's going to browbeat my teenage son, it would be me. Nobody else is allowed to. And I said, please tell me more. And apparently the hygienist that her son Ryan had beaten him up inside his mouth, and because of how rough she was, and also was barking at him about how poor his home care was. His parents should be ashamed of him. No girl's ever going to want to kiss him. And this is a 16-year-old son that mom was definitely protecting and didn't want, not definitely protecting, but this is a 16-year-old son that came home, and mom didn't like to hear this, so she was taking the rest of the family and going somewhere else. I said, Patty, I'm sorry that happened to Ryan, and I apologize for the behavior of our hygienist. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. We have 5 other hygienists that support this practice. So with your permission, I'll move the rest of the children over to the other hygienist that we have today, and I'll be exiting Sherry for the day. I did. I went back and I talked to Sherry, and I told her found out that Sherry's son was in juvenile hall, was put into juvenile hall the night before. She'd been up all night long worrying. So the first teenager she saw, she took it out on him. And I just basically said, Sherry, we don't need to subject the rest of our patients to this. So feel free to take the rest of the day off. I salvaged that patient. I salvaged the patient of 8, between 6 kids and the mom and the dad. But I salvaged because I asked. And not enough times do we call and make that phone call and ask, why have you chose to leave? But more importantly, the piece of this, and that I said I want you to write down, is that you need to create codes within any software system. Most of them have a free range of codes that don't affect our production, our collections, or anything. They have a miscellaneous code range, but create codes that are specific enough as to reasons why patients have left your practice. And in California, where I live, the majority of patients leaving practices right now is because most of the dentists do not want to be Delta dental providers anymore. So most of our reasons for patients leaving is because we're no longer a provider with Delta Dental, or because we don't accept their insurance, or I want it to be because they've moved away from the area, making it difficult for them to even come to our practice. Now, I work with one doctor up in Seattle. There's people that travel all over the world to see him, and he's got a really cool map in his office that shows where people travel from to come see him. But that piece about inactive codes, track them, find out why, but create the codes that are specific. I have codes in my practices: unhappy with the doctor, unhappy with the hygienist, unhappy with the admin team member. I don't have to be specific, but I can assign it to a provider because a code can be assigned to a provider. So when you get that phone call, and the majority of the time, Danny, when we get that phone call that a patient's leaving a practice, is because we've heard from another office. It's not because we've heard from the patient requesting their images be sent somewhere else. And it is a law to ask permission to release their information, but at the same time, when I ask for permission to release their information, I encourage team members to find out why and document why.
That raises a good point. So in that circumstance, I'm sorry, excuse me, but in that circumstance where the first inkling you have of a patient leaving your practice is from another provider requesting records, that requires an outbound call then to reach out to the patient.
Correct.
And so then you coach your clients on I imagine the verbiage is quite similar. It's just a matter of calling instead of hearing from them and asking the question. Or are there any subtle differences?
The verbiage is just, basic, very similar to what I said. I say, Danny, this is Adele at Dr. McKee's office. I just heard from Dr. Cordano's office.
Mm-hmm.
So I waited for you to do anything.
Yes.
Right?
Say yes. Very good. So I could say, for instance, I'm going to be changing providers. I'm afraid. I'm sorry.
So I'm curious, Danny, do you mind, first of all, I need to get your authorization to, I need to get your permission to authorize us to release your records, because I need to have you sign something and fax it back over to me. Do you have a fax close by?
Sure, I do.
Or an email or whatever, because I want their signature. So and then I'll say, and before I collect your fax information, may I ask you why you've chose to leave our practice?
Yeah, I'm just to follow the other example. If anyone's going to browbeat my teenage daughter, it's going to be me.
So the browbeating portion of it, what would it help you if I shared with you that we'll never have to have your daughter see her again?
Yep. That would certainly help, yes. Is that possible?
It's absolutely possible. We're fortunate enough to have a practice management software that immediately lets our team members know who to schedule with. So I will make sure that there's a pop-up that says, do not schedule with Sherry, any family members. Will that work?
Sure. Now, Adele, would you share sort of the reason? Because it sounds like your quick response is that you weren't surprised by this. That perhaps you'd heard that the hygienist was having a bad day because of the problems she was having with her own son. Right. So you wouldn't.
I would not share that information. I mean, I didn't even share it with the team members. I mean, that's hers to share, not mine. Mm-hmm. But what I found out was her not sleeping and worried about her son was going to affect the rest of my patients on that day. Mm-hmm. And my doctor always gave me permission to do what was best for the practice.
Right.
So in that situation, I did not reschedule 7 more patients. I moved immediately into what I refer to as assisted hygiene scheduling. And my team knows, even one of the teams I work with right now knows that if we lose a hygienist because of COVID, we're immediately moving into assisted hygiene scheduling.
Got it.
Because they're sick. And I'm not going to reschedule 8 patients. I'm going to do everything I can to maintain my patient flow because we're already hit. so bad so far behind, right?
Yep.
So that inactive patient, if there's actually, so far, there's really two major things I would want you to always, actually three. Let's recap those three major things. One of them is having the hygienist always add a value-added statement into their clinical notes. They hand off of that value-added statement so the admin team can always help secure appointments by having those value-added statements. The second would be to make sure the admin team always puts people on hold so that they can refer to information within that patient's clinical chart and give good ammunition to help keep those patients on the schedule. And then the third, at this point, would be to create inactive codes so that you can track reasons why patients are leaving your practice. And for any of the doctors that are on this call or this recording or listening to this recording, this is going to help immensely when it comes time to selling your practice. Every time I mention this at, like at ADOM, I was speaking at ADOM and I spoke at Academy of Dental Management Consultant meeting too. And the transition team that was there as a vendor came up and said, I've never heard somebody say that, but you're absolutely right. We never, ever know how many patients have left the practice by year. We only know the total amount that have left the practice. So if you create a transaction code, it will support it by year and reasons why, and then you have an opportunity to salvage that patient too. All right, so now these are codes, inactive codes that patient moved out of the area, inactivated patient due to insurance, inactivated patient deceased. You know, I used to say the only way, actually, I won't say that saying, because we used to always say that the only way a patient's going to be inactivated is if they have deceased. That was always our goal at our practice, is no matter where we are, our patients traveled to come see us because of the relationships that we had with them. So just some examples of some inactivation codes. So now what about that reluctant patient? Well, I gave you the definitions of active, inactive, and how to treat and track each one of those. That reluctant patient is the patients that fall through the cracks. It's the patients that haven't been in your practice in 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, 3 years, 5 years, sometimes even 10 years. So the reluctant patients, I'm able to track who those reluctant patients are by a unique ReCare system. And some software allows us to track how many times we reached out to those patients. If the software doesn't, I actually will marry it with an electronic engagement software that does say, all right, so this patient's been sent 3 notices. This is my ReCare system. After they've been sent 3 notices, we send them an inquiry letter. If they don't answer to that inquiry letter, then we mark them as a reluctant patient, and we do a total different marketing to those patients. The reluctant patient is a unique type of marketing that is humorous and funny at the same time. And I'm going to show you some of those examples. But the specifics about the reluctant patient, as I said, is that everybody in between, and our goal, our absolute goal, is to re-attract those reluctant patients and reactivate those reluctant patients with them seeing something funny. So I want to talk, I'll show you some examples of this, but I want to talk about how you work your ReCare system. I teach people to do the ReCare system once a week, not for a whole month or for a whole year or the last 3 months. I teach team members to do 8 weeks overdue, 16 weeks overdue, 24 weeks overdue, and then at that 32 weeks overdue is when they get that letter. They're now 9 months overdue. But I teach team members to do 1 week at a time. So if you're pre-appointing all of your patients, 90 to 95% of your patients you're pre-appointing, you typically have anywhere from 3 to 8 a week, excuse me, that you'll need to reach out to. Excuse me. So I calendar it to work every single week, and we send 8 weeks overdue, 16 weeks overdue, 24, and then those people, the 32 weeks overdue is an inquiry letter. And then after that inquiry letter is sent, there's a follow-up phone call, and if the follow-up phone call specific to, hey, Danny, it's Adele at Dr. McKee's office. Did you get my letter? And I wait for Danny's response.
Yes, I did.
So how come, and because I have a relationship with Danny, I'm going to say, well, so how come you didn't call us back?
Well, it's just been really hectic. You know, we were out of town for a while, and I meant to, so I'm sorry about that.
Well, now that I have you on the phone, do you know it's been 11 months since we've seen you?
Is that all?
Yeah, how time flies. Danny,
Yep.
I have an opportunity to see you next Tuesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. How's that work?
You know what? That would probably work well. I appreciate the call because I know I need to get in there, and I've just, you know how life gets in the way.
Well, I'm the lucky one. You picked up the phone today, so we get to see you next week at 2 o'clock.
Yep, I look forward to it as well, Adele. I appreciate the call.
Thank you, Danny. May I consider this confirmed?
You may indeed.
All righty. I'll see you next Tuesday at 2 o'clock.
That was too easy, right?
You know, that was too easy. And you know, and I know I threw you on the spot at that point too, but I'm a firm believer. If I know him, I'm going to. My dad's military. My dad always taught me that if somebody's giving you a hard time, it means they really like you. So I grew up, I'm going to give somebody a hard time because I really like them.
It shows intimacy, actually, in an odd way. It does. You can get away with that. I think my brother built his dental practice by being superficially rude to people.
Well, it's funny how you treat people the way you want to be treated, and I like to barter. I'm somebody that likes to give somebody a hard time. So, okay. So working a ReCare system weekly really helps. The next thing I want to talk about is the creativity. And when you have a patient that falls into that reluctant category, I spoke earlier about how we re-attract them. We do everything we can to do something that just makes them look at us differently. And this is what I want to show you, some of the creative marketing that we've done. I've worked in the past, fortunately, with a young lady that is just brilliant with artistic design, and her goal is to understand who you are as a person and your passion outside of business in relationship to your business name. So my branding, I'm a boat lover and I'm a water baby. I love water. So my business name, Synergy, Practice Management, with a Synergy symbol, but the wood grain and the water feel of boat. I mean, my card reminds me of being at the lake. So this is a branding that she did for me. But if I'm going to send ReCare cards out that are not the ReCare cards like Samantha Dominick's, there is electronic engagement. And trust me, I'm a firm believer in electronic engagement, but I also believe it's a cross between the two. And you have to still send some of these unique postcards out. Before I started doing the branding that I'm going to show you for unique ReCare the ReCare cards that I'm going to show you, I started making sure that all of our branding was on our ReCare cards until I started getting creative. So this was a doctor of mine, Dr. Kevin McCurry. He's now in Sheridan, Wyoming, but he lived in Sacramento, California for years. Very tall cowboy, and very high tech, but his business card and his ReCare cards were the same as his business card branding, with a extracted tooth with a cowboy hat and a lasso. And I asked him, I said, so are you in the business of extracting teeth or keeping teeth? And he thinks I'm funny. It's like, no, I'm serious. Your branding is not showing the caliber of dentistry that you do and the high tech dentist that you are. So he worked with my friend Nancy Lashley, and this was for his branding, which is his business card. He's a fisherman. He loves to be out in the nighttime fishing more than anything, but he's also high tech. And so this is the art side of his business card. Even his letterheads that go out, it's a water grain to it. You can see the water feel and the fish through it. So it's showing how the high caliber. This is a doctor of mine. He's a Filipino guy, very short. But when he worked with Nancy, the monarch that's above the B and the monarch that's on the side right here, this was a monarch that was in the entranceway of his house when he grew up in Hawaii, and it reminded him so much of his mom. So he broke down in tears. She had no idea about this, but that's just the sense that she got from visiting with him. So I'd like to show examples of the unique type of brandings. Those are just some of my favorites. But this is what we do when we want to reattract those reluctant patients. This is the same gentleman that I just showed you about the monarch, Dr. Bambico. We sent out a card, and I said, you know what, this is actually one of my very first reluctant recare runs back in 2001, 2002. But I brought this one on because we sent this postcard out, thankful for you, and to 338 patients that hadn't been in the practice. We got 113 of those 338 patients back into the office. And when we sent this out, I asked the team, when patients call, find out what was it that brought their attention back. What was it that made them make the phone call back? Because they'd been sending postcards out. They'd been sending those silly Samantha Donick's postcards that are wild. What we used to do cartoons. We used to do the wildlife scenery or the funny looking animals and stuff like this. But this one here, when people ask, well, what was it that prompted you to call? And they said, well, the card you sent, of course. Well, what was it about the card that you sent? They said to see that the team, if you're looking at this, everybody on your left, the first three from your left, Diane, and Mia, had been there for 18 years. And then the other two on your far right, we just joined the practice as we're continuing to grow. So the patients that saw that the team members, the longevity of the team members is what brought them back. And Dr. Bambico, he's just a hoot. That was the number one reason.
Yep, I see fun and informality too here, and family by the virtue of the fact that they've got some long-term employees that people would recognize. So yeah, great.
And
message.
He's trusting them to hold him.
And right, that's right.
And I'm taking all these pictures because we're just having so much fun too. This is my own dentist, and our first reluctant run, we were actually down in Old Sacramento celebrating one of our. We do a group birthdays for everybody at the office. And so I saw the caricatures, and I said, let's just be our first reluctant recare run. And on the other side of it says, if you don't recognize us, you're overdue. And this is his whole team. So it was just really fun to have something different that you wouldn't do before. This is a team, and I took this picture because this gentleman in the middle, the older gentleman, he was being embezzled, and even in my town, everybody knew about it. So I sent a card out. This is his hygienist that I used to work with myself, but I sent a card out showing a whole new team to reactivate patients underneath him, and to also introduce our new associate, Dr. Cunahan, who is my husband's dentist because he's here in town too. But this was a recare card that we sent out to patients to show we're here, we're good, we're okay. This was funny. I started working for this doctor in Arkansas, Crossett, Arkansas, and turned down this street that's right over here. But the sign that he had was completely broken, laying on the ground. The brick pillars were falling apart. And I typically visit an office every 3 months after giving them lots of homework to do. And I said that we need to reactivate patients with this practice, because the doctor hired me to groom his practice to sell it. And when somebody hires me to groom a practice to sell, the whole team knows. And we groomed it 2 years later, cut a lot of overhead, and sold it to a really nice doctor. And every single person except for two are still working for this office 7 years later. But the the sign being broken, I wanted to reactivate patient, and it was about, if you haven't seen our new sign, you're overdue. This was a team of mine that I worked with. This was actually our team portrait for our reception room. Whenever I work with team members, this is a good point to put out for anybody that's on this call too. Once a year, a photographer comes in. Once a year, a photographer comes in to take new headshots, our funny pictures, our birthday pictures, our Halloween pictures. We have them all done. So they're done for the year. Everybody's doing changing of uniforms so that we can have them available for the marketing. But this particular one we did for this practice, and the doctor in purple right here, she was a dental assistant, a hygienist, and then became a dentist, and we built a good-sized team. So I said, okay, let's do something funny, and we did the Mustache November for our recare. And so that was what we sent out for our recare cards, Mustache Have Missed You. So, just tying a little bit of humor and fun into it. This was probably one of my funnest, and having it turn out to be black and white.
Speaking of tying.
Oh.
Speaking of tying humor.
Yeah, he's been tied up lately. So this was a very fun one. The same one, taking care of your gold smile. I'm going to go through these quickly because you can see if you do funny things that involve you as a doctor and your patients, you're humorizing them. Have you checked off your spring cleaning list yet? That was a really fun one. Time to get in the game. Give us a call. So these are the unique recare cards that we send out to patients that have fallen through the cracks to help rebuild our reluctant recare and reactivate those reluctant patients. I have hundreds of them, but I just really wanted to give you an example of the ones that are some of my favorites. This one, Fall Leaves and We're Still Here, that's actually in the reception area now, showing that the whole team having fun. But it turned out to be such a beautiful picture too. We hear there's a rumor going around. I was hired, these two doctors right here, the young one bought it from him, but the patients weren't coming in because they heard there was a rumor going around that Dr. Schmidt was leaving. So I squashed that, and for 2 more years, we were able to keep the patients in and Dr. Schmidt's schedule full. But that was sending a recare card. Dr. Robertson, we had so much fun doing this. We did 3 of them in a row one day, roundup time, where we are rounding up our patients we have yet to see in a while. We wanted to make sure you stay on track. Call today. Just some funny, silly things. Autumn leaves. We're still here. Because I'm fortunate enough that most of my offices are not side by side. I only have one that's side by side. I can do the marketing. It's not just our sign that's new. If you haven't met me, you're overdue. Hired a new hygienist for this practice and had a brand new sign made that illuminated up in the middle of the night instead of
this really goes
again.
Well, yeah, this really goes well beyond just marketing and reactivation. You're an image manager or public relations. You identify rumors, and it's almost a form of crisis management, getting in there, anticipating a situation and turning it to your advantage. This is really, really powerful stuff.
This is a fun part of it. This one probably is, I think this is one of my close to last ones, because it's a husband and wife team, and it's in Los Banos, California, one of the largest bass community in our area. And we're out in the middle of a sheep farm. We miss you, EWE, the female sheep,
It's great.
So just fun, creative stuff. And, this is actually my last one because it's just showing that changes are happening. So, Danny, that time went by fast. Anybody have questions?
Oh, we have a lot of questions. That was great, Adele. And yes, it went by fast, but I know that everyone will appreciate the impact and the power and the message. Really, the takeaway is if you want to reactivate or encourage reluctant people to get active, is humor goes a long way. It shows self-deprecation and family and intimacy, and I just think that's great. And I'm sure that anybody that wants to pick your brain and to learn about some ways that they can, harness that power to their own benefit. We'll be able to do so. But let me jump into questions, and you ended really right on time too. We've got 10 minutes for concluding remarks and questions. So first question I have is, well, you've covered this, but let's have you an opportunity to maybe elaborate a bit. How does the third patient classification, that is reluctant patients, help engage more ReCare patients?
So how does the reluctant patient engage more ReCare patients? You're actually reaching out to those people that have fallen through the cracks. And when you add humor to it and make sure that, the doctor's involved in this, you're able to recapture those patients. I will say there's going to be a handful of those reluctant patients you don't want back, but the majority of them you do. And they've just fallen through the cracks because of them being too busy.
Yep. And then that's your choice. And because of the way that you're gathering data in your reporting, I think that's really powerful too, not only to help with practice sale, to help demonstrate the average lifetime of a patient and what your turnover truly is. It also puts you in a position to decide who to reach out to and to prioritize that too. Okay. Here's a question I thought would be great too. Does your consulting extend beyond what you've shared today?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm a full practice management coach, Danny. And, when it's something that's outside of my wheelhouse, like true marketing, that's when I refer to people like you. But my tagline is, when somebody asks me what it is that I do, I say I help offices move from surviving to thriving, because there's just little things that can be done to allow that to happen.
Okay, here's a question. I don't know if you could answer this in your own experience, but so I would say, in your experience, how many dental offices currently have a documented recall ReCare system in place?
That's actually a really good question. They don't anymore. It's outside of the practices I'm working with, I will tell you, almost every single new practice I start working with, I'll ask the question, what is their recall system? And they'll say, well, we don't have one in place. It's if patients schedule, when they leave, that's typically a recall. Well, what happens when you have all these new patients and then you're not projecting how many more hygienists that you need to be adding based on this, and this? And so when electronic engagement came into play, and this was something that was repeated multiple times at ADOM this last week when I was speaking at ADOM, a lot of the speakers said, yes, electronic engagement is great, but it doesn't replace our traditional ReCare system. It can help support it. It just doesn't replace it. And,
and it's certainly no replacement for verbal skills.
No.
Yep. Okay. What kinds of things? Go ahead. You wanted to finish the point?
I was just going to say, it's actually a really good question, because it's interesting that the person had asked that, because when I was on site with a brand new practice last week, they said, we don't have time to work a ReCare. And I have 5 doctors, but only 2 hygienists. 5 doctors and 2 hygienists. How can I fill 5 doctor schedules with 2 hygienists? My doctors are doing hygiene. That's not right.
Okay. Next question. What key numbers should an office use to track the hygiene department's success?
What key numbers or what codes?
Code.
Say that again,
I really
Danny?
don't know what they. Well, it says, what key numbers should an office use to track the hygiene department's success? So I guess what metrics?
What metrics to me would be anything that's hands-on. For me, it's they're cleaning the X-rays. I do not track exams. I do not track products. I based on a hygienist salary, what I'm paying. It depends on what the hygienist should be producing based on fee schedules and whatnot within your area. But I keep my metrics for hygiene productivity specifically on cleanings, perio maintenances, root planings, and films if the hygienist takes them. Now, on the days that I have assisted hygiene scheduling, doctors getting those films. But I do reward the hygienist a little bit different on the assisted hygiene days so that I don't have to reschedule. But metrics for hygienists are traditionally based on their hands-on procedure codes, not products and not exams, but it's also driven on if you take their salary, and traditionally it's at least 3 times of the hygiene salary is what our hygiene schedule should be netting.
Right, that's what I've heard too. Can you?
My goal is 3.5.
Okay. Well, more is better, that's for sure. Can you go over again how your weekly activation system works?
So every single week, I will go 8 weeks, go back 8 weeks, that's Saturday through that Sunday, and send those patients that are 8 weeks overdue. And then I go back 16 weeks, that's Saturday through that Sunday. Then I go back 24 weeks, and I send everybody that's 8 weeks overdue, 16 weeks overdue, and 24 weeks overdue. And then if you have a really good, there's only a handful of practice management software that actually track how many times you've reached out to a patient, but there are a large handful of electronic engagement softwares that do it. Most people are using both these days. So once I know what the system of practice is using, I can direct them one direction or the other. But knowing software, because I used to sell software and digital x-ray and intraoral cameras and all that stuff before I started consulting or coaching. I like the word coaching better. I really do, because I coach for life. And in the 80s and 90s, consultants hired and fired, and I coach for life.
I like that.
But anyway.
Yep. Well, we've only got time for one more question. There were several others, but as I said, Adele will be happy to reach out to you. I know who's asking what, and I'll make sure that she gets those questions. Last question. If you don't hear back from a reluctant patient after X number of attempts, do you ever deactivate them?
10-year mark is I do inactivate them, but I still keep something in front of them, because traditionally keeping something in front of them is every 9 months. The way that my ReCare system is, it's every 9 months that reluctant patient has something funny from our office. And I will bring family members to come to that outcome, because one of the things that's unique about the way that I send these ReCare cards, if they're funny, most people don't put their mail away, right? If there's something funny or picture-wise on it, it stays on the counter. And
it has a shelf life,
neighbors,
for sure.
It has a shelf life. So, and it stands out. I mean, I send them to be 5 by 8.
Well, and I think I think the pendulum is swung too, because everybody is inundated with electronic communications, and so direct mail has become a little bit more. It was considered passé and really obsolete for quite some time, and it's had a resurgence. We've seen response rates to our direct mailing increase because of that very fact. The other thing about, well, I won't go on that tangent because we're talking about prospective patients, but yeah, I mean, the card is a refreshing change of pace for many people these days. So yeah, I think it works well. Well, that's all the time we have for. I will remind you that in a few days you'll receive an email with an evaluation and quiz, so that you can apply to receive your continuing education credit. And now I'd like to invite you to mark your calendars for Tuesday, November 1st, when our special guest presenter will again be Dr. Leonard Tao, whose presentation is titled, "Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, Tips for Dealing with the Little Issues in Your Dental Practice That Can Make a Big Difference." When you decided to become a business owner instead of just a practicing dentist, did you realize that doing the dentistry was going to be the easy part, while being a practice CEO, running the day-to-day operations, and managing your team was going to be the hard part? This is why dentistry is such a stressful career. Len has successfully navigated practice purchase, ownership, and now an upcoming retirement from clinical dentistry, while at the same time becoming the industry expert on online reputation marketing. As an attendee, you will learn what most often stresses dentists out, how to effectively address practice stressors, the simple changes you can make today that will have a big impact on your quality of practice, the secret to not sweating the small stuff, and how to deftly respond to negative reviews in a way that actually enhances your reputation. It all happens on Tuesday, November 1st, so please be sure to save the date and watch your inbox to register. Until then, this is Danny Bobrow, thanking you for your commitment to practice perfection, and thanking you once again, Adele Reische, for a terrific presentation.
My pleasure.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.